Warning: this video goes into detail about the killing of a man, woman, several teens, and several children. If you believe these stories could distress you, please leave this video and join me on my next video. Please take care of yourself. So there is a haunted hotel in Salt Lake City, Utah, where guests have claimed to have heard footsteps and even screams of children. There have also been multiple sightings of paranormal apparitions that resemble small children. Emmanuel David, formerly known as Charles Bruce Longo, was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but was excommunicated in June of 1969. He was introduced to the LDS Church while serving in the U.S. Army. After his time in the military, he went on a mission in Uruguay. After he served his mission, he enrolled in the LDS Church's largest school, Brigham Young University. This is where he met a Swedish woman by the name of Rachel, who was formerly known as Margit Birgitta Eriksson. The two of them got married and would go on to have 7 children together. Emmanuel David later on announced that he was a prophet and a divine figure. He developed a group of followers that they referred to as the family of David. Because of this, he was excommunicated by the LDS Church, and his followers went with him. For about a year in the late 1970s, Emmanuel David, his wife Rachel David, and their 7 children, ranging from 6 to 15 years old, were living in a $90 a night luxury hotel in Salt Lake City, Utah, on the 11th floor of the International Dunes Hotel. The police estimated that this family had paid around $30,000 to live at the International Dunes, and they were reportedly eating takeout meals from fancy Salt Lake City restaurants every evening. Since then, the hotel has changed ownership a few different times. After it was the International Dunes Hotel, it became the Shiloh Inn, and now it's a Holiday Inn. Both Emmanuel and Rachel were in their late 30s, and the hotel staff said that they never saw Mr. David go off to work, and the family never ate at the hotel restaurant. The family preferred to have room service and takeout delivered to their room each and every day. The family also homeschooled their children within their hotel room, and the staff rarely ever saw the children at all. But because Mr. David paid their room charge each day with a $100 bill, and the family kept mainly to themselves, no one really ever questioned them. They just thought they were an overly religious, reclusive family. However, this was an understatement. This family was basically a cult. Emmanuel's friend, Sergeant Davis, described Emmanuel and his family to be extremely devoted to each other. The family also believed that their father, Emmanuel, was the Holy Ghost, Jesus Christ, and God. The family would have been completely lost without their father, and they did whatever he instructed them to do. Then, on August 3rd, 1978, witnesses went into shock as they watched Mrs. David throw her children one by one off of the 11th story balcony. Witnesses below said that the older children seemed more willing to jump on their own. They even used 3 chairs that were stacked up on each other as a way to jump over the railing and off of the balcony. But the younger children struggled and were trying to hang on to the bars of the balcony as Mrs. David forced them to remove their hands. "I just couldn't believe it," said Felix Palacios, a delivery truck driver who saw the children falling from the sky. And as he looked up, he saw the woman herself throwing the children over. He saw the younger children fighting for their lives as they tried holding on to the balcony railing. Mrs. David, 38, and her children Elizabeth, 14, Joshua, 13, Deborah, 12, Joseph, 9, David, 8, and Rebecca, 6, all succumbed to their deaths, except for 15-year-old Rachel was the only one who survived, but she was left in critical condition. The mother and 4 of the children died as some of their bodies struck a first-floor roof, and the other 2 bodies bounced as they hit the sidewalk. And the other 2 children who passed away had died later on in the hospital. Mr. David was found dead of carbon monoxide poisoning in a borrowed van at the top of a nearby canyon on the following Tuesday. He had unalived himself by piping exhaust into his truck, and the family had unalived themselves as a way to join their father. Emmanuel's death occurred 3 days before the incident. The police stated that Mr. David was not apparently employed, and he did not know how he was going to afford the hotel bill. But the FBI said that Mr. David was under investigation for federal wire fraud. Rachel David, the sole survivor from the family's murder-suicide plunge, is confined to a wheelchair and lives with her uncle in Aurora, Colorado, where they still live the ideals of her father's cult. She says that she still believes her father is God and will return to Earth one day. She has also attempted several other suicide attempts since this horrific incident. Following the David family deaths, some of Emmanuel's fathers continued in the family of David, and in 2000, some reported that they were still awaiting the return of Emmanuel. Marta Venta was 27 years old, and she was working at her job as a receptionist at a budget Travelodge hotel in Bournemouth, Dorset, in England. She was a Spanish national and was really enjoying her time living in England. December 9th, 2020 was a normal day, and she pulled up to her work later that night where she was scheduled to work the graveyard shift completely alone. As the night proceeded, she saw a crazy-looking man standing outside the hotel window. It was the man who had checked into the Travelodge prior to her arrival. He made eye contact with her, and he began to bang on the windows over and over again. Marta was scared and confused. This man seemed to be unhinged, and before she could really even process what was happening, Stephen Cole, a 32-year-old man, entered the hotel reception with a pair of clippers in his hand. Marta was bewildered and taken back. She backed away from him, but before she could process what was happening or run away, Cole began attacking her in a horrendous way. The attack lasted for over 40 minutes. He brutally beat her to death, mainly by kicking and punching her over and over again. After the attack, Cole walked into a police station and calmly told the police that he had just killed somebody. When asked why, Cole reported that he had never met Marta before this, but when he walked into the hotel reception, she smiled at him in the wrong way. Before this attack, Cole had exposed his genitals to the public on 3 different occasions throughout June and July of 2020, and shortly after this, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Now, I just want to note that because he had schizophrenia doesn't mean that it's the reason why he murdered Marta, as the majority of people who are diagnosed with schizophrenia are not violent whatsoever. Mr. Wright, Cole's psychiatrist, concluded that Cole was actively psychotic at the time of his attack, and apparently Cole told the psychiatrist that he could get the help that he needed if the police came to the hotel. Days before the murder, Cole had been staying at the Russell Court Hotel, where he was kicked out for punching and kicking 2 guests unprovoked. And when Cole arrived to the Travelodge, the police were called shortly after and described him to be agitated about the smoke detectors and was also banging on windows of the hotel rooms on the 1st floor, even though he was staying on the 4th floor. The same day, his family had phoned his general practitioner requesting medication, but his psychiatrist, Mr. Wright, stated that Cole had not taken his medication for several days up to that point. Marta's father, Louis Elena Alice, gave a statement saying that his family had suffered infinite pain and the murder had devastated many people. He also called for every person responsible for his daughter's death to be held accountable, including the hotel management, who scheduled Marta to work the graveyard shift alone and unprotected, as well as those who were responsible for Cole's health care. Sentencing Judge Morris stated that had there been a regrettable and irreversible failure by some to spot the signs of Cole's psychotic deterioration, despite him and his father trying to obtain the antipsychotic medication that he so desperately needed after his release from prison. Cole was then sentenced to an unlimited time at a hospital. A young girl, Sasha Marsden, who was 16 at the time, was studying childcare at a local college. She lived with her parents in Staining, near Blackpool, England. She was informed of a job opening at a nearby hotel in Blackpool, the Grafton House Hotel. She got someone to give her a ride to the hotel where she was dropped off. She was nervous about this interview, but it was a part-time gig doing maid work, so she felt like it was the perfect fit for her lifestyle at the time. She would have time to keep studying, and she would be able to start saving money to eventually be able to move out of her parents' house and attend a college. As she entered the hotel, a man by the name of David Minto introduced himself as the caretaker of the hotel. He told her that he would be the one to interview her, so she nervously followed him down the hallway to a room where the interview was to take place. Sasha was doing her best to make a good impression. She smiled as she shook his hand, and she was sure to make eye contact with him. However, his eyes were not as warm as she was expecting. They were dark, soulless, and caused her to feel confused. Minto led her into a room where he closed and locked the door, and as soon as they were alone together, he viciously attacked her with a large knife. He then removed Sasha's clothes, and he began to sexually assault her. After he was done, she pleaded for him to let her leave. She looked for a way to escape, but there was no way out of this locked room. He taunted her, and then he proceeded to stab her over and over again. She tried to fight back. She tried to scream for help, but he wouldn't stop, and nobody came to save her. He stabbed her a total of 58 times, mainly in her head and in her neck. Then he tried to set her body on fire. After he realized that he could not burn her down to ash, he took her body and wrapped it up in a piece of carpet underlay, and then placed trash bags over the rolled up carpet. He then carried her to an alleyway near the Grafton House Hotel and left her there. Sasha's body was found in an alleyway in Blackpool's South Shore district. That same day, a 22-year-old man and a 20-year-old woman from the local area were arrested on suspicion of her murder. The injuries inflicted upon her were so severe that she had to be identified by DNA from her toothbrush. Sasha's blood was found on Minto's clothes and throughout the hotel, as well as on the murder weapon. Judge Anthony Russell described it as a ferocious and sustained attack with overwhelming evidence. The judge looked at Minto and told him, "You have not only destroyed the life of one human being in a most brutal way, but your cruelty has devastated her loving parents, family, and friends. There is not a shred of common humanity in you." Sasha's family gave a statement to the judge where they said that each wound Minto inflicted upon Sasha had stabbed at the heart of each and every one of her family members. These things will haunt us for the rest of our lives. And Detective Superintendent Andy Murphy said, "I believe that Minto is a calculated killer. His actions were premeditated and evil. He lured Sasha to her death by promising her work at the hotel. She placed her trust in him, thinking that she could earn a few pounds to help support her through college. Instead, she ended up in the hands of a killer." On February 3, 2013, David Minto was charged with her murder. Minto appeared in court the following day. He pleaded not guilty on April 24, 2013, and on July 26th, Minto was found guilty of Sasha's murder, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 35 years before being eligible for parole. Minto appealed against his sentence in February 2014, but it was upheld by the Court of Appeal of England and Wales, and the minimum term of 35 years was upheld. Sasha's sister Gemma Aitchison now campaigns to help and bring awareness to sexual assault victims. And sadly, Gemma has been the victim to online trolls who have mocked her sister's death, and have also stated that they would do the same thing to Gemma if they could. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. If you want to hear more stories, please click the subscribe button. And it would help me out a lot if you gave my like button a hug and a pat on the head. Thank you for listening, and that's all for now.